Good morning. So today we start covering our first industry within the book chapter, which is special events and conferences. So please make sure that you read the corresponding chapter on the syllabus. So some important definitions. First is RFP. RFP is short or the acronym for request for proposal. Request for proposal. So basically what it does, a request for proposal, it lays out the event details. And the special event planner is going to send this out to vendors like florists, and basically tells the florist or the vendor, whatever the vendor is the number of attendees, the theme of the event, the location of the event, and other potential issues, like, for instance, the event could be taking place outside, those sorts of things. And so again, the request for proposal is important for the special events planner, because let's say that you don't know any of the vendors in a particular city. So when I used to work in special events, we would go to, let's say, Dallas or Denver or Philadelphia. We didn't know anybody there. So we would ask the convention center or the venue if they had a list of vendors that they worked with, or maybe they had an in-house vendor. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. But if they didn't, we would seek out who could be some good potential vendors for our event. And so we would send out an RFP, a request for proposal, to find these vendors that could do our event. So again, RFP, request for proposal. And I'll discuss this in more detail later in the lecture. Sponsorship. Sponsorship could be financial support, some money. It could be product support, or it could be both. So let's just say it's Pepsi Cola as your sponsor. Good for you if you're able to secure them as a sponsor. So Pepsi might give you money, or they might give you product only, or they might give you both. If they give you both, good for you, because they're giving you money and product for your event. So again, sponsorship is financial support. It could be just product support, or it could be both. It could be financial support and product support. Honorarium. Honorarium is a fee for services rendered. Fee for services rendered. So let's just say that you are going to hire Magic Johnson as a keynote speaker for your event. Well, he is going to ask for an honorarium. So what that means, again, is a fee for services rendered. Flag code. Flag code is a set of rules on how you should treat the flag, or need to treat the flag. So again, it's a set of rules on how you should treat the flag, specifically the American flag. So for instance, right, you're not supposed to drag the flag on the ground, for instance. So there's a list of rules on things that you can or cannot do with the flag. Make sure you know those, because you can offend somebody if you don't treat our flag with the proper respect. Flag code. So VIP. VIP stands for very important people. Usually means extra work for the planner. So again, very important people typically means extra work for the planner. Typically means something like a limousine service. It typically means something like they have to stay in a suite, or they have to get a first-class flight from wherever they live to the location of the event. So anyways, VIP, very important people, or person, I should say. Very important person, VIP, means extra work for the planner. Writer. A writer is a list of band requirements that the special events planner must meet in order for the band to perform at the event. So again, this is kind of a long definition. A list of band's requirements that the special events planner must meet in order for the band to perform at the event. So for instance, any decent band is going to have a writer, a list of demands that the special events person must meet if you want that band to perform at your event. So for instance, it might have on the rider, okay, we need to stay in a 4-star hotel. We need to have limousine transportation from our residence to the airport, and then have a limousine pick us up from the airport and take us to our hotel. It might have things like we need a per diem of a certain number of dollars per day that we're there, so we can spend money on our own meals, for instance. And so again, it's a list of a band's requirements that the special events planner must meet in order for that band to perform at the event. A set is how much time the a band agrees to play at your event. So that's a set. So typically means 45 minutes. So again, it's how long the band agrees to perform at your event. Typically one set equals 45 minutes, not always. So typically, oftentimes, it might be in the writer, oftentimes is in the writer, or sometimes it might not be. The manager might just tell you, okay, well, they'll come to your event, but they're only going to do one set. And one set might mean 45 minutes, or it might mean a little bit less, or maybe a little bit more. Or maybe they might say, oh, we'll play 2 sets at your event. And if that's the case, then that means 45 minutes, take a break of 15 or 20 minutes, and then they'll perform again for 45 minutes, means that, more or less they're going to be there for close to 2 hours performing. So again, a set means how long the band agrees to perform at your event. Typically, it's 45 minutes. Crisis. Crisis is an unexpected event that affects the success of the overall event. An unexpected success, an unexpected event. So again, it's an unexpected event crisis, an unexpected event that may affect the success of the overall event. So again, a crisis is an unexpected event that may affect the success of the overall event. And last but not least, ROI. ROI is a return on investment. ROI, return on investment. So oftentimes a sponsor wants to see if it's a worthwhile event for them to invest their money in. So they're going to oftentimes ask for an ROI. Generally speaking, this is something that the marketing person handles or the sponsorship person handles, but the sponsorship person or the marketing person may ask for your input on the ROI in terms of like how do you envision this particular event and how are you going to set it up so it maximizes the sponsor's return on investment. Before we really begin, a couple things to think about. First and foremost, you do really want to register if you do happen to have your own special event company right now. That's cool, and you've already registered your domain name with ICANN, and just by starting your own URL or domain name through GoDaddy or something like that, you already registered your URL. You could also purchase a URL if you have the funds to do that. So most of you, well, those of you who have a company already or are thinking about starting a company, those are 2 options that you can do. The next thing that all of you should do is trademark your company name. If you have a cool slogan, if you have a cool logo, you should certainly trademark those because you don't want to lose those. So that's always a recommendation. You can contact the trademark office, and I'm not sure how much they charge nowadays, but it's always a good idea to trademark all your ideas. Trade organizations, well, there's lots of trade organizations within the industry. These are some of them. There's a whole bunch of those. There's a local organization that's not a trade organization called the Events Planner Association. And I mentioned that organization just because it's a good organization to start networking if you are interested in working in special events or live entertainment or just really just anything within entertainment or tourism, it's a good idea to start networking out there, because it really is a business of who knows you, right? Not necessarily who you know. They have to know you. So grades are obviously, well, as a professor, I think grades are important, but um, the students with the highest grades don't always get the best jobs straight out of college. It's people who been putting in the work in terms of networking. So go out there and start networking with these various organizations. There's more if you do research online. All right, so without further ado, the first thing I want to sort of discuss, which is one of your definitions already, is a request for proposal. And so when I used to work in entertainment and do special events, it really saved us a lot of time when it came to selecting vendors. So generally speaking, our RFP had these elements in there. And so, so for instance, we had, like, say, the event theme, whether the event theme was, let's say a 1920s theme or maybe a 1980s theme, whatever the theme was or concept was, we would let the vendors know so they can kind of get a good idea of what we were envisioning. Event details, any important details that the vendor should know. So for instance, is it a formal event? Is it semi-formal? Is it casual? Is it a large event? Is it a small or intimate event? What type of event is it going to be? Always a good idea to lay out any potential issues or problems that you may have or encounter. So, for instance, if you're going to have an event outside, it's always a problem if you're going to serve food, just in terms of maybe it's going to be hot or cold. So that's always an issue, is dealing with the weather outside for any event that happens to take place outside. And event indoors, by the way, also have issues as well, but you always want to lay that out. Another issue that you could lay out while you're going to serve alcohol. I mean, every once in a while that might be a problem, but if you think it's going to be a problem potentially, you do want to let the vendors know. Outline any sort of special event manager's requirements. So for instance, you may ask the vendors to please provide you with the list of references, because maybe the event manager wants to know if you have any experience doing similar types of jobs. And so that's what I mean by outlining special event manager requirements. And any other special requirements that the special events manager may have, they do want to lay it out. Like maybe they're going to have, I don't know, 1 hour to set up. So can they set up things quickly? Or maybe the parking lot is far away from the venue, and so they're going to need to sort of walk to get to the actual space where they're going to have the actual event. So whatever the special event manager thinks is an important requirement, the event manager should mention that in the RFP. You should always make a deadline for submission. That lets the vendors know, and it lets you know too whether or not this vendor is interested or not in working with your particular event. And for us, as somebody who wasn't familiar with, let's say, vendors in, let's say, Denver or San Diego or Dallas or Miami or Philadelphia or wherever we were at, we didn't know who the best florists were or the best caterers were. So it was, for us at least, it was a very efficient way of selecting vendors for us. There is no clear winner in terms of, let's say that, you had 2 or 3 very good, let's say, proposals that were submitted to you, and you don't know which ones to select. You could, nowadays, of course, you could have them pitch on Zoom, or you can have a telephone conversation with them, or if you happen to be in town or they're nearby, you could always have a meeting with them face to face and pick a winner that way. So, so what exactly is a special event? It's any event that centers around celebrities, industry leaders, executives, or heck, it's just a special occasion, right? And so for me, at least somebody who used to work in special events, any event, right, where you can essentially get fired for doing a bad job was a special event. So for instance, right, a lot of industry leaders may not be quote unquote celebrities in Hollywood, but they are celebrities within their industry, right? And so you have to treat them with the same level of respect as you would anybody else. And that's a good philosophy to have just in general, just in life, really. So in terms of the market structure for production as well as the market structure for distribution is a monopolistic competition. And what I mean by that is, within the production side, there's lots of companies that put together events, right? Whether it's small wedding planners or small companies that produce conferences or special events. There's a whole bunch out there that are, that are very small or they're very large. And so they don't produce identical events. Even if you gave, two wedding planners the specs for a wedding, right? What they end up doing with those specs would not be the same. It's not identical in terms of production. It could be close, but it's not identical. And certainly the market structure for distribution is, it's vast. There's all sorts of different venues that are large and small, right? There's obviously traditional venues to do an event. There's non-traditional venues to do an event. So for instance, we did one time, I think in Denver, we did a concert on a street, right? And so that's non-traditional. So moving on to Murphy's Law. Murphy's Law is something that, anybody who works in events will let you know and tell you that it's an important mantra to remember. What can go wrong will go wrong. It's just, that should be ingrained in your mind. And the reason that you do that is because you always want to have a plan B in place in case you have a crisis, right? A crisis is going to be some sort of unexpected event that could hurt the chances for success for your event, right? So any sort of unexpected event that could hurt your event's potential for success, you should be very mindful of. And so always have a plan B in place in case a crisis does occur. Hopefully, everything runs smoothly. But, every single event that I worked on, there was always something that went wrong. So you just need to be mindful of that. Write everything down. It's important to have a very good be very detail oriented. Write everything down. You generally speaking, right, the idea of like being anal is not considered to be a compliment, but honestly, in the world of special events or anything live, if you write everything down, it's like it's the biggest help ever. That actually what makes somebody into a great planner. So if you're a great note taker, right, you can be a great planner potentially. Now that being said, besides writing everything down and taking good notes, it's important to be well organized. In other words, right, seeing an event from A to Z, not just having a good idea, but be able to execute all the steps to complete that idea is really important. Being a great communicator, being able to talk to people who are, big time celebrities or executives, but also being able to talk to the help and being a good communicator with both types of individuals that you're dealing with. Being a great communicator is very important. And the last quality for being a good special events person is being good with money. What I mean by that, right, is that there's event planners, and I've met some that are pretty good and then some that are great. The ones that are great are the ones that you give them a $5,000 budget or a $10,000 budget, and they make it look like the event cost $25,000, right? You're like, wow, I can't believe you made a $5,000 event look like this. So they're really good with money, and so that's critical for somebody who wants to have success as an event planner. So here we have crisis number one, and I don't know about all of you, but at least in my neighborhood, it seems like I see a bounce house, at least 2-3 times a week around my neighborhood. I used to always wonder, wow, I wonder if there's lots of accidents with these bounce houses. And it turns out that, yeah, there's a whole lot of accidents that happen with bounce houses. So here we go.
New study out this morning about the dangers of bouncy houses. That backyard birthday party favorite is also home to more than 200 child injuries each week. ABC's Bazi Kanani is here with the details. Good morning, Bazi.
Good morning. Some really stunning numbers in this study. It's become a common part of childhood America, that bouncy house. And now a new nationwide study looked at emergency room data across the country to examine just how many kids and how those kids are getting injured in inflatable bouncers.
Oh my God.
Watch as this inflatable slide goes airborne with children inside, then crashes down on a crowd.
I couldn't even get up. I fell so hard.
13 people were injured, including children. The most serious cases, typically from bounce houses that weren't tied down. Take a look at this house that flips due to strong winds and wraps around a pole. It's just the kind of startling video the authors of a new report about these inflatable amusements want parents to consider. Researchers say from 1990 to 2010, more than 64,000 children were sent to the ER due to injuries in these air-filled playhouses. By the last year of the study, an average of 31 children were hurt each day. Most of the injuries came from children falling down or running into each other, resulting most often in broken bones and sprains to the arms and legs. But there are other areas of concern.
They did see that 7% of the children had concussions, and we really worry about head injuries, in particular in young children.
The study, just out this morning, suggests better design may prevent injuries and says there should be better guidelines for using them safely.
It's obviously important to make sure that bouncy houses are properly tied down. One other thing that parents can do is just make sure that kids of the same size are in a bouncy house at the same time. The study is published in the journal Pediatrics.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, Bazi, thanks very much. New study out this morning.
Okay, so how to address this crisis if you have let's say a client that wants a bounce house. First and foremost, you could have them sign a waiver. That might save you. It may not. I do believe the way it works with waivers is that the language in your waiver has to be exactly what happens in real life, right? So I don't know, if your language says if the bounce house flips over and XYZ happens, then, and if the bounce house does flip over and XYZ does happen, then I guess you're protected, I believe. Now, that being said, I personally, if I had a special events company, I would have a waiver, but I would also have just, insurance, just general liability insurance, just to protect you if you're going to be using bounce houses for your events. Not sure. Anyways, moving on to crisis number 2.
New study out.
Now, before I show you the video clip for this, so let me explain what this event is. So this is the Southeastern Conference basketball tournament. So it's a year-end tournament to determine who's going to advance to the men's basketball tournament in March. And so it's a big deal. You have to complete the tournament that weekend, because I do believe the the games begin on either Wednesday or Thursday. I think Wednesday. So anyways, you need to have a champion by that weekend determined. And so you can't just delay the event. And so during one of the basketball games, this is the opening round, mind you, the venue gets hit by a tornado, and there's no other venue that can accommodate 40,000 fans. So I'm going to show you the clip, and so think about what you would do in this situation, and I'll tell you what they did as well after I show you the clip.
All the way to the rim for a big Mississippi State basket.
She is fouled by Stewart. That's a block. And, we're hearing some rumbling behind us. There's some concern. The building is rocking a bit. Not exactly sure why. Some of our standards may have something to do with weather conditions still exist in downtown Atlanta. Thank you. There's a tornado warning in downtown Atlanta, we're being told, and it has caused the top of the Georgia Dome is actually moving. But we do have power, which is amazing. I do see some movement. Actually, some debris in the air behind us.
Right, they're coming from the roof.
See our camera, if there's any way we can get our camera to point in the direction that we're in. Upstairs, you'll be able to see the standard. There you have it. Many of our camera guys have been taken away from their positions because of this. Gary Clem, our director. And apparently a tornado warning was in the area, so this could be a case of a tornado actually being in the area. And it definitely sounded like a locomotive.
It did.
It sounded like a freight train.
Which is the sound of a tornado.
Which is the sound of a tornado.
Yeah.
And it clearly was. Exactly that.
And both teams are off the floor, we should say. They have taken.
All right, so your event gets hit by a tornado. Wow, what are the chances of that? But anyway, so obviously you want to get everybody out, right, as quickly and as safely as possible. Now the option of playing the games or continuing the tournament at that particular venue, not a possibility because your building was just hit by a tornado, right? And so I'm sure the engineers need to make sure that the structure is sound. So that's probably going to take a couple of days, who knows? And so you gotta move to a different venue. And so that's what they did. The organizers of this event moved the game, or the games, I should say, plural, to Georgia Tech. And so, which was a smaller university in Atlanta. Unfortunately, the venue was super small, and so they couldn't accommodate all the fans. And so they had to, I believe they had to refund all the tickets from all the people who bought tickets for the basketball games. And they only allowed school officials and I believe only family members to watch the rest of the basketball games in at the facility at Georgia Tech. And I believe that the organizers put up big projectors outside of the venues. I'm not sure which venue they put them outside of, so people could sit outside and watch the basketball games if they wanted to do that. So I don't know if that was the best solution, but that's what they did. Just to kind of give you an idea of, this idea of having a plan B is really important because, again, who would have ever thought that, your event would get, or at least, your venue would get hit by a tornado. But it does happen all the time, mind you, that you have, freak thunderstorms or something like that that strikes, some sort of live event outside. That does happen. It's fairly common. All right. And so moving on to the first slide when we talk about research. So the first thing that you really want to think about when you're, before you start to do an event, at least for me, it was always really important to really think about it, before I even decided to tackle an event. Sometimes I had no choice because this is what I was told to do. But if you do have your own event company, I think it's important to do your own research and to really figure out this is really what you want to do. So first question that you always want to answer is purpose. What's the purpose of this event? Is it to improve customer relations? So maybe that means, having a trade show at some particular venue, you invite the media, you invite influencers, and hopefully that's going to improve customer relations, right? Maybe it's to improve industry relations, same sort of idea. You have the event at a venue, but in this case, you do invite the media as well, but you also invite industry insiders as well as influencers, and what you want is networking at that event because you want to improve industry relations. And in terms of the influencers, you can choose to invite those or not. It's up to you whether or not the client thinks that's a good idea. Maybe they do, maybe you don't. Or is it just simply the purpose is just to have a successful wedding? Sounds simple, but not really. Target audience. Who is the target audience? The target audience is, what determines success or failure of your event, right? Were you able to successfully attract the people that you wanted to go to your event? They actually come to your event, whether it's based off of race, ethnicity, age, whatever. That being said, the target audience also determines your insurance costs. So let's just say, I don't know, your event is a rock and roll concert, or maybe just a hip hop concert. Chances are the venue is going to charge you more just in terms of insurance than, let's say, your event was a jazz concert. I mean, is it right? Is it fair? Well, no, it's not, but that's what happens. And so also sometimes target audience, the sponsors want to know who is the target audience. So again, sponsors want to know who is the target audience. The next thing you want to research is the date. Of course, living in Southern California, we don't really have to worry about dates as much because generally speaking here in California, Southern California at least, you have about 355 days of good weather. Every once in a while you have rain. But that being said, outside of California, Southern California, you could always have weather issues with the dates. So you want to be mindful of the weather according to the date. Also, you have to be mindful of competition, right? And so I remember one time we had a conference in Miami, and a lot of people weren't coming to our events because they were going to the beach or they were going to other events that were taking place in Miami. So we didn't do our due diligence in terms of the competition. And of course, we had a nice venue right by the ocean, so that didn't help. So be mindful of competition. One last thing about competition. Another time we had a conference in San Diego, and it just so turned out that the Republicans were going to be having a conference at the same time. I can't remember if it was right after or right before. But anyways, they were going to blow us out of the water just in terms of attention. And so the Republicans were, however, nice enough to buy up the floors of rooms that we had already bought from the hotels. And so they were nice enough to buy us out. And so we ended up moving to a different city. So again, be mindful of the date. You definitely want to research the location just in terms of what type of location this is going to be. It's indoor, outdoor. Each have, some challenges. Is it going to be a small event, moderately sized? Is it going to be a large event in terms of number of people? How much is it going to cost? Is it even available? So you definitely want to answer those questions. Going into also the location, you always want to be mindful of having enough bathrooms, whether the event is an indoor venue or an outdoor venue. It's important to sort of like gauge that. And then last but not least, you want to understand who's judging you, right? You're being judged by who? Who's judging you? And how are they judging you by? So are they judging you based off of, okay, did we get, I don't know, let's say they tell you, okay, we're going to judge you how well this event went by, let's say, did 500 people show up? All right, and if 500 people showed up of their target audience, then obviously that would be a success, right? But again, it's always really important to understand and be able to read the room, understand that, who is judging you, right? And judged by whom, or by who. Anyways, you always want to do a SWOT analysis, right? And for me, it's always really important to understand my own strengths and weaknesses. That's internal, right? For all of you, you have your own sets of weaknesses and strengths. Now, things that we can control are, opportunities and threats. Those things we cannot control. Those are external. Strengths and weaknesses are internal. So this is just kind of give you an idea of the Super Bowl requirements. So in the NFL, anytime they're thinking about planning the next Super Bowl or the next several Super Bowls, several cities, right, that bid for the right to host a Super Bowl. And so this is the criteria that the NFL has for that particular city. So the NFL obviously does some research in terms of whether or not that venue that has all these components in there, so that way they end up awarding the game to that particular city, right? And so one thing that I always find really interesting about these requirements is the fact that, any sort of crisis that occurs where you need fire, police, ambulance, or any other infrastructure services that need to be created, doesn't cost the NFL a thing, right? So I always find that, interesting. So for instance, let's say if you needed to expand the highways or the roads, the NFL doesn't pay for that. The city does. Anyways,